Okay, so my first question would probably be, when did you first decide you wanted to be a writer?
When I was 16.
16.
So a little bit younger than you are now. And I was in what we call high school, which is what basically you're in.
Yeah.
And what made me decide to do that? Because I wasn't thinking about it. And the year before, when they went back to do a documentary on me, they interviewed my year before teacher. And usually your teacher is going to say, oh yes, I knew she was brilliant, etc. But this one told the truth and said she showed no particular ability in my class, which was true. But then I had a different teacher the next year, and apparently, I don't think it was she who put the idea into my head, because in 1956 in Canada, nobody was going to be a writer. So there were no creative writing classes. We didn't learn it when we wrote things in school. It was essays. But I think I just started doing it, and it was more fun than anything. So I changed career paths. I switched from science to writing, and everybody thought I was mad.
Wow, you're laughing at them now.
Well, I don't know, that most of them are dead.
What book of yours are you most proud of, and why?
What am I most proud of
Yeah.
that I've written?
Yes.
Oh, well, I never answer that question. And the reason I don't is that if I choose one of my books, the others will know about it and they'll be very annoyed. They'll say, we spent all this time with you and you're just dismissing us. So I don't choose amongst them. If I put in the time on them, I must have been interested in them at the time.
Okay, so how do you create such in-depth storylines and plots? Like, how does it come to your head?
Well,
'Cause they're all
you
so
can get the
different.
idea for a novel in quite a short period of time, but then you have to sit down and work at it. So what they say is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. So the rest of it is working it out. And while you're working it out, you often get more and different and new ideas, because the idea that you may have originally started with isn't working out quite the way you thought it might. So your biggest friend as a novelist is your waste paper basket. So you throw out the things that aren't working, unless you think there's something you might use later, in which case you save it. And that can be a long process. It can take, a year, 2 years to work out an idea that you might have had in 5 minutes. So we don't know where ideas come from. They can come from anywhere, really. But it's the working out of it that makes it involved. And when you're working it out, you're looking at structure and you're looking at pacing. So here is a tip. If you're writing a murder mystery, put one dead body quite close to the front. Worth remembering.
Yes.
Otherwise, people are going to be going like this. Where's the murder?
Many of your books contain emotionally draining scenes. How do you deal with this as a writer?
Emotionally draining scenes.
Yes.
Let me tell you a story. When my kids were about 5, they said, we're putting on a play. And they sold tickets to the play. They were 25 cents. So we bought a ticket to the play and we went to the play. There were 2 of them. And the play started, they were having breakfast. It's the breakfast motif. And they were saying things like, could I have some orange juice? Yes, here it is. I would like some milk, please. Here's the milk. Could I please have some cereal? Here's the cereal. This went on for a while. And I said, is anything else going to happen? And they said, no. And I said, well, in that case, we're leaving. And when you think of something else that's going to happen, we'll come back to see the rest of it. So a story isn't just this and that and this and that and this and that. Something has to happen. And the something that has to happen should be a surprise to the person reading the book. and often to you, the person writing the book. And of course, some of those things are going to be emotionally draining scenes, because if it's just one happy event after another, people are going to be going, is anything else going to happen? So I think we have emotionally draining things in books because it allows us in a way to wonder how we, the reader, would deal with that. So how is the character in the book dealing with it? Do you think they're dealing with it well? Or do you think they're not dealing with it well? And if it were you, how might you deal with it? So when you're reading the book, you're right there with the character. So don't open that door. They open the door. Don't go in. They go in.
Yeah.
So you are wondering all the time, what would I do if I were that person? You know, if I were Harry Potter, how would I deal with the dragon that is about to be executed? Like that.
Okay, so while I'm unsure of what the equivalence is in Canada, many of my friends in sixth form that are taking English literature are currently studying The Handmaid's Tale in their A-level studies. How do you feel that some of the current, maybe future writers of tomorrow are studying your work?
Well, they've been doing it for a while. And I think
awesome.
we've seen some books and things coming along that you might call relatives of The Handmaid's Tale. Because remember, it was published first in 1985, which is quite a long time ago. And at the time, quite a few people said, this will never happen. This will never happen in the United States. Jump cut to 32 years later. What can I tell you? It's happening. Not quite the same way, and not with the outfits. But there's been a rollback of women's rights and a pushback, and we're seeing that happening before our very eyes, which is why people, apart from the fact that it's a very good TV series, that's why people got so involved in it. It didn't seem like a fantasy anymore. So how do I feel about it? If there are no young writers, there will be no future readers. So every group of young writers that's coming along is continuing the tradition of reading and writing. So they're part of a very long history. But if all of a sudden there weren't any young writers, that tradition would stop. So that's why it's a good idea to encourage young writers. If you are keen on the idea of books and reading, more young readers and writers need to come along, or else it will all come to an end. And wouldn't that be sad?
That would be. Lots of your novels are based in a dystopian society. We as humans take comfort in believing that the future will be right in the present or the past. Post-Trump, do you believe this?
Having seen the pushback, I actually am quite hopeful, because although there is this desire to roll time back, you also see a lot of people saying, no, that is not going to happen. But it is a struggle. You know, right now there are two opposing forces.
100%.
And of course, you're optimistic, because the mere act of writing is an act of optimism. Think of all the ways in which it is hopeful. First of all, you set out to write a book. You believe you're going to finish it. That's pretty hopeful. Then you believe that once you finish it, it's going to be good. That's hopeful too. Then you believe someone will want to publish it. Even more hopefulness. And then you believe if it's published, somebody will want to read it, which is very hopeful indeed. So just writing something down presumes a future reader. You don't write things down if you think nobody will ever read them. It might be you at a future time. It might be you reading your own diary that you wrote 5 years ago. But just recording it means you believe that in the future somebody will be reading it, and that's a pretty hopeful thing.
I'd like to ask, what would be your top 5 tips for young inspiring writers?
How young?
So 11 to 18 specifically.
Wow. Okay. I noticed that each of you have a notebook.
Yes.
So tip number 1, get a notebook.
That's good.
Write down things that come into your head that you think you might find useful later. So that's number 1. Number 2, read a lot, and read critically. That is, decide, I like this, I don't like that. Why do I like this? What qualities do I like about it? And notice how the writer is putting the story together and how they are handling the language of the story. So writers have all begun by being readers. And you will be selecting out from all the writers that you come across your patch, as it were, your special writers that you really like. And you will be learning from them, because we've all learned from other writers. Number 3, pay attention to your posture, because writing is very hard on the keyboarding is hard on the neck and the back. And you don't notice it so much when you're young, but it will catch up to you. And it's hard to write when you're in agonizing pain. So the back exercises, getting enough exercise, walking around. If you come to a block and you don't know where to take your story next, there's 2 good things to do. One of them is go for a walk, and the other one is go to sleep. Because during the walk, when you're thinking about something else, the answer may very well come to you. And if you give your unconscious mind, I have a problem, go to sleep. You wake up, you may often find the answer. But the 5th one is, don't be afraid to throw things out. And by the way, when you're writing, nobody's seeing it except you. So don't worry about what other people might think of it while you're writing it. If you then decide that you don't, that this isn't where you want to go, that this isn't what you want to put out there, there's the waste paper basket. You have complete freedom while you are writing.
I love The Handmaid's Tale, and I also watched the Hulu series, and I'm extremely eager to find out what's happening in season 2. What was it like having to continue the story after finishing the book?
Well, luckily it's not me doing it. There's a writing room which has about 10 people in it. And the head of it is a person called Bruce. And then there's a number of other people, most of whom are female. Bruce said that he thought that he hired all these female writers and thought they would agree with one another, but that wasn't the case since women are people. So they thrash it out. They have a general story arc, and then they break it down into scenes, and they each go off and they write a scene, and then they bring it back and they all discuss it. So it is a group activity. I get to read the script, but I don't have any control. So I have no veto. No writer of a novel ever does when it's a matter of a film or television, because it's classic that writers don't like the product. And imagine if they had a veto, they could say, "Well, I don't approve of this, and we're canceling this multi-million-dollar project." So that's why they never do. But I'm pretty close to Bruce Miller, and we talk on the phone quite a bit. So I have input, but I don't have final say. And when you're making a series like that, there is no one person. There's no one person who has total control, because when you think of all the people involved in it, for instance, Elizabeth Moss is a producer on it, so she gets a say. And the producer's got to say, the directors, the people doing the editing. You sit in the editing room, and they may have shot a scene maybe 5 times, and you have to look at each of those 5 times and decide which one you like best, and then they choose that one. And then there's somebody who works with color. They're enhancing the color.
What a job role.
So yeah, I mean, it is a multi-person enterprise, and any one of those links might be weak. I think we've been very lucky. We've had an excellent team, and I'll mention here the designer. His name is Anne Crabtree. So the costumes that you see, the look of things, that's her work, and very painstaking it was. For instance, she looked at 50 different shades of red before choosing that particular red. And then she looked at all of the shades of blue and ended up with that sort of blue-greeny thing. But they've thought of every detail. For instance, in the commander's house, you'll see some paintings. Each one of those paintings is in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts.
Wow.
So if you know that these people have stolen the paintings and put them in their own house. And the signatures of the artists on the paintings are the only things you can read in that house that isn't in the commander's study. So of course I asked the obvious question. I said, "Are they the real paintings?" And they said, "No, we got this nice man in China to paint them for us." He did a very good job. So they thought of every detail, like what sort of silverware, what sort of the amazing scene in series 1 where she's given this little pastel meringue cookie. So they would have thought of, okay, what are they having for tea? Mm-hmm. Would you like a cookie? It is a particularly poisonous looking thing. So every detail they've been very mindful of. They didn't want there to be any discrepancies, so something that wouldn't be there. And they've been very, in season 2, they've been very faithful to the main idea, which is nothing goes in that doesn't have a precedent in real life, somewhere, sometime. So they have a research team. Justify this to me. They will say, okay, so here's where it happened. All of those things they're careful about.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, and very good luck with your writing and everything that you're doing.